What is up, guys? I wanted to chime in at the beginning of this video because we hit 600 subscribers. You guys are awesome. Now, the video you're watching today, it's going up in a couple hours. I filmed this a couple months ago, so excuse the kind of lack of enthusiasm, Get into that whole YouTube spirit now where I'm trying to be a little bit more upbeat, but nonetheless, I really appreciate you. Brother, for real? Go figure. But nonetheless, thank you guys so much. I love all of you guys, and we're on the road to 1,000. We're gonna slowly but surely make it there, but nonetheless, love you guys. I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later, guys. What is up, guys? So today's video is gonna be probably one of the better videos I ever post, just because I think I have quite a bit of good information here. I'm gonna make this one a little bit more rapid fire. I'm not gonna drag this out and try to make it a 20-minute video. So I have today a list of 5 tips that every automotive photographer should use or at least consider. Now, there's no right or wrong when it comes to automotive photography, but over the years of me doing this, I've learned a lot of kind of tips and tricks and things that have helped speed up my workflow and also help me produce better results. So today I'm going to share those with you guys. These are definitely kind of 5 on the more basic side of things for maybe someone that's just starting out, for beginners or intermediates, maybe not someone that's been doing this for a while. Nonetheless, let's just hop right into it. Number 1 is a CPL or circular polarizer. Now, this is one of those tools that's so cheap, and if I don't have it with me, I will quite literally cancel the shoot. And you're probably wondering, for those that don't know, what is a CPL or circular polarizer? A circular polarizer, without getting overly technical, it's this little thing right here, and this pops up, or you put this and screw it onto the filter threads on the front of your lens. They have different sizes. This you put on there, and you'll see these images are both shot at the same exact focal length with the same exact lens, but you'll notice on this side, the car is much darker, there's less reflections, whereas this one, there's a lot more reflections on the side, but maybe on the windshield there's a little bit less. So this is showing that the circular polarizer, you actually twist it on the front of your lens, and it will block out reflections. So for this shot, it was twisted so that way it was blocking a lot of the reflections on the driver's side portion of the vehicle, whereas this one, it was typically, it was on the windshield. So 9 out of 10 times when I'm shooting, I always have it on the windshield. I don't usually shoot this sort of angle too often, and if I do, it's not in an area like this. This is a very unique location where it was 100% surrounded by trees, so there was no way to run away from these reflections. Again, a dark colored vehicle with trees or green foliage close by, not much you can really do with that. But you guys can see, I mean, this is a huge difference. Let me see if I can just find another shot quick for you guys so you can see kind of the effect it has like on the windshield. So make this bigger for you, but it definitely blocks out like all the reflections on the window, or for the most part. Again, this is an extremely harsh example, but if you guys do not have one, here I pulled it up on Amazon. Most of the ones I have were either from Best Buy or from Tiffin right here. Now there are like Hoyas, B&Ws, those are much more expensive options, and I'm sure that the quality of glass is a little bit better. But for me, I can't justify $100 on a polarizer when these are giving me great results at this price point. I used to work at Best Buy, so I got their branded ones for super cheap. I believe it was called the Platinum brand. So I got those for like a couple of bucks, but I don't think it matters too much. I wouldn't say go with the cheapest ones you could get, but Tiffin has good reviews. I've never had any issues with mine, so I do recommend those. I would put a link in the description, but it all depends on what filter thread yours is. If you look on your lens, it'll have a number with like a little O. I'll probably put up a picture as an example. But yeah, make sure that that number coordinates with this one so that way you guys get the right one with the correct thread size. Next up, another very important one is which angles you should shoot at. Now, no, this doesn't mean like which angles look best, but this is a great example of a shoot I had probably about a year ago. You guys are going to notice the color is very different right here on the side of the vehicle. Notice how this is almost more of like an orangey red, whereas this is a deeper red. So when I talk about the way you shoot, is you always want to be aware of where the sun is at. So it's difficult to tell, but in this photo, the sun is right back over here. So when that's happening and you're shooting towards the sun, it's a much brighter, because the sun rays and whatnot, the UV rays, are going straight into your lens, meaning you have to crank up your shutter speed. So by that, you're darkening the image quite a bit, and you're going to start losing a lot of detail, and it's going to drastically change the color of the vehicle based on here. So for these shots, I was right in front of it, and you can see it's much darker. But if I move over to the right a little bit and the sun now is way off on my right, you get to see much more the natural color of the paint. So this is really, really important, guys, when you're scouting locations and figuring out what time of day, because this will dramatically, I mean, look at the difference between this right here and this right here. I mean, you would think this is two different, paint codes or two different vehicles, but it's not. You just really have to learn to work with the sun and the environment around you. So that is my, another very, very, very important thing, is to really figure out, okay, how should I park the vehicle? A cool tip that I recommend is if you're going to somewhere maybe you haven't shot before, get there 10 to 15 minutes early and move your vehicle around. Park it a couple different ways and see what angles look nice with the current lighting you have. Now, this doesn't matter as much when it's cloudy or if the sun is already pretty much set, just because then the lighting is even. You don't have any harsh lighting coming from anywhere. So that's why for most automotive photographers, the best weather you can get is kind of rainy or cloudy, because then you don't have to worry about this. So with harsh lighting, pro tip, get there early, move the vehicles around, see what works. I never, ever, ever anymore shoot with the sun directly behind the vehicle, because you lose a lot of the color and detail on the vehicle itself, especially if it's a cooler paint color like this one where it's like an infernal red or something. But nonetheless, very important tip there that'll save you lots of headaches and hassles. Next up, this one's extremely, extremely important, shooting in RAW. So when shooting in RAW, you're retaining a lot more detail and information in the image. I'm sure 99% of you guys know what that means by RAW. With most cameras, you have three options. You could shoot in JPEG, RAW, or RAW plus JPEG. So JPEG is a much smaller size format. You're not going to get as much information. By that, I mean you're not going to get as much detail. So for example, right here, so if we were shooting JPEG, there would not be not enough information. So when you're editing, having RAW with a lot more information, it's uncompressed. You can shoot in compressed or uncompressed. I always shoot in uncompressed just because with the Sony a7R II and the a7R III, the file sizes are already massive. I don't need to have 100 megabyte, file sizes for each photo. But nonetheless, let me hop back on track. Shooting in RAW, it just retains all the information. It's not doing any sharpening. It's not doing anything extra. It is just capturing everything that it can, and then it allows you to go back in and edit. So with RAW, you're gonna have a much sharper image. You guys can see there's just so much stuff here. I mean, you could even see kind of like the orange peel in the paint. Like, it's pretty crazy. Whereas if you shot in JPEG, it would be much more like, it does its own thing. So there might be a little bit more contrast, it might have some built-in sharpening, but you can't go in and adjust everything quite as much. You just have a lot more to work with. That's kind of like the most basic way to put it. If you guys are still slightly confused, I would say Google like RAW versus JPEG. I'm sure there's a lot of other people on there that maybe describe it better. But the biggest takeaway from this is if you're an automotive photographer or any photographer in general, please shoot in RAW. You will thank yourself. It gives you a lot more stuff to work with. So definitely please do that. Now, this next one is a little subjective, number 4. It's shooting with a white balance. For years, I always shot in auto white balance just because I was like, the camera's going to do all the thinking. It's going to do whatever's best. But what I quickly realized is when I was doing a shoot, for example, like let's say I took this picture and I'd make a preset just with kind of like the basic foundation of the photo. And then I'd go to the next image and I'd paste it and it would look way off. The reason being is with the auto white balance, every time you focus, the camera is doing a bunch of different calculations, and it's, if you move to the other side of the vehicle, the lighting is going to be different. The camera might think, okay, we got to change the temperature up to 5400. So then when you paste that preset, all of a sudden it just looks way wonky. So what I do is when I get to a shoot is I take a couple test shots. I go through whatever basic ones they have into the cameras. Most of them will have like a cloudy, sunny, daylight, tungsten, couple built-in options. And I typically always choose cloudy just because it gives a little bit of a warmer tone to the image. But the beauty of that is that it always keeps the temperature and tint the same. It does not change. So that way, in post, if I need to change that, I can. But that preset that I make, or those settings, it works the same on every image. I just have to go in and change for the exposure and if I want to pull out certain details and whatnot. So biggest takeaway from that is always try to either do your own manual white balance when you get there, if you have like the little cards, or B, do what I do and just pick one of those like presets in your camera for the white balance and stick with that for the entirety of the shoot, and then change it in post if need be. Last but not least is shooting at ISO 100. Now, I always do this. There's very few times that I change this up. So for example, let me go find it here. Shooting at ISO 100 just means that your sensitivity of your sensor is at like bare bones. It's not inducing any noise. The higher you crank that up, that number, it adjusts the sensitivity of the lens and it can induce grain. So for example, when I shoot at this location here, beautiful WRX, this one, I had to crank it up a little bit because there was not a lot of ambient lighting. Even though in this image it looks like it, a lot of that is due to post-production. It was pretty dim here. So this was shot at like, I believe ISO like 320, and even that is pushing it. When you're shooting at ISO 100, your image is as crisp as it's gonna get. Nothing else is going on. ISO, a lot of people I see, like if you guys watched my last video with the editing update of your guys' photos, there was a beautiful photo of, I believe it was an FRS or BRZ, at sunset, and the gentleman exposed the image for the sun, or the background, the sky, and when we went to go edit the photo and bring up the shadows, there was just an absolute ton of noise. And I was like, what the heck? So sure enough, I go and I look at the metadata, and it showed, or the histogram, excuse me, and his ISO was at 400, which for most modern cameras, that's not even an issue, but for whatever reason, the one he was using, I mean, the image was scrapped, I'll be honest. It was just so much going on. I mean, no matter what I did, even with noise reduction, I had to crank that almost all the way up, and then the image just loses all of its sharpness, and it looks kind of muddy. So I always do my very, very best to shoot at ISO 100. I would rather sacrifice shooting at a very low shutter speed, handheld, and, you know, maybe miss a couple shots. Like, for example, like these, I would take like 3, 4, 5 shots at the same exact angle, just because I know then I have at least one keeper, but I'm also maintaining the best image quality as possible without inducing any grain. Now, for example, like this shot, I believe was at like 1/15 or 1/10. This was shooting with my 35 f1.4 at f1.4, and it was difficult. Now, I do recommend using a tripod, even though I don't, just because it takes all the guesswork out of it. If you set it up, you click the shutter, it's gonna take a sharp image. You can't really mess that up. So that's another, I guess, kind of half tip, is if you're shooting in an area that has very low or dim lighting, having a tripod with you is not a bad idea. So yeah, guys, that is like my 5 kind of beginner intermediate tips that if you're just starting out, really, really, really recommend taking everything I said. You know, seriously, take it with a grain of salt. I'm not saying that it's the right way or the wrong way, but if you take into account those 5 tips, it will make a big difference, and you guys will definitely like your workflow better. So if you guys enjoy this, please drop a like or a comment if you have any questions. If you guys haven't already, subscribing would be awesome. I have a lot of videos coming up. I really want to make this channel extremely informative. There's not too many people on here that go in depth about automotive photography. So like some future videos coming up, I'm gonna do like a big one. It's probably gonna be like a 15 to 20 minute long video talking about rollers and how I take them, because that's a very, very common question I get. I'm also going to start doing like point of view photo shoots, so that way I can show you guys exactly the angles I'm working with the lenses, a whole bunch of good stuff. But I've rambled on long enough. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate everyone checking in, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Later, guys.